All right, hello everybody. This is podcast State of Exile, episode 10, the second coming with Chris Wilson. Um, what we're going to be doing today is we'll be doing a live Q&A with the viewers, and it's going to be he'll be on in about 45 minutes. We've prodded the whole entire community to be empowered and ask the questions, those controversial questions you want to ask Chris himself. So all I ask for you guys is, from here on out, we want those questions in chat. So if you have anything that you've been wanting answered for a while, now's your chance to put it in chat. Before we go into the full summary of what we're going to be doing, we'll do a little introduction right now. My name is Zeno. I'm mostly known for hosting this podcast and doing some crazy builds. I try to pioneer new builds. Sometimes they're not successful, sometimes they are. But I like to have fun with this game and play casually. If you didn't know, Path of Exile is a free-to-play game. It's an action RPG, those dungeon crawlers, hack and slash style. And it could be found on pathofexile.com or even on Steam in the free-to-play section. It's a very, very diverse game with a lot of money spent on, just coding everything, and it's still free-to-play. Also with us today, we have Terrex. Terrex, if you want to tell everybody about yourself.
Hey everybody, Terry here. I'm known for being a passionate and dedicated racer. I just love to help out and share general Poe knowledge and share everything that I know when it comes to racing and help make the learning for races much more enjoyable for newer racers and to help maybe experienced vet racers just get better.
And we also have Hegemony with us.
Hey, what's up, guys? I love doing these podcasts, and I'm excited to speak to Chris again, and we have a lot of great questions. I'm also known for my YouTube. I have a pretty extensive YouTube. I've been playing PoE since closed beta, so I've seen it all.
So, I just want to say thanks again for grinding your games. The fact that they're allowing, the lead developer to come on our podcast it's a very humbling experience. And the fact that they care that much about the community just shows that this is a company you want to support. So, there's always that. I want to thank Twitch for getting us on the front page today. They've been helping us out tremendously with getting Path of Exile out there. The only way to really keep this game going is have a more, a bigger player base. So thank you, Twitch, for allowing that to happen. And I want to thank the viewers and the mods. The mods out there that, lay down the law, and the viewers that continually come out and support us. We appreciate it, guys. We really do. So before we kick this off, I want to talk about the summary. The summary for today's, the first 45 minutes is going to be discussing the racing breakdown, the current state of racing. Terry has some qualms, but he also has some pros. And we're also going to be discussing the patch notes released on July 3rd. It's going to be an open group discussion. Also, we are, again, fire off those questions. Any questions you guys got, we will copy and paste them, and we will put them inside of a Google Doc. This is your chance to get heard by Chris. The way how we're going to do that segment is we're going to answer as many questions as possible. Anything extremely controversial or anything we want to interject about, we will. But for the most part, we want your guys' opinion more than anything else. Our opinions we will discuss once Chris leaves. So that way, during that hour block with Chris, you guys will be heard. You hear enough of us every week or every other week, so don't worry about that. So without further ado, Terry, or you got something to say?
Yeah. Keep in mind that Chris's role in the company is he's making the business decisions, and he's also the lead developer. So as he oversees everything, with the exception of maybe like the art department, he's not going to be familiar with the nitty gritty of like the numbers of a balance type thing, but he'll know the overall objective and design. So design questions are always good. You can even ask business related questions, but we're going to pick questions that we think Chris can best answer, and something that was more balanced, intricate, maybe Rory or Carl could best answer that.
All right, so Terry, what do you want to discuss with racing? I have no idea what you're about to throw at us.
Jumping into it, I want to kind of talk about the competitive atmosphere change for races. I've been racing since Season 5, so I have a fair amount of experience with racing so far, and the competitive atmosphere change that I've noticed lately, it's been a bit disheartening, but I really feel like the competitive atmosphere can come back to where it was once before. And so I'm just gonna go over a few headers on what has happened to the competitive atmosphere or the feel when you're in a race, and a lot of these are relative to on competitiveness, whether or not you're racing against the other racers or against yourself. It's just like playing to get better, playing to like show improvement, and just to do the best possible. So I've talked about it a bit before, but there are corrupt zones and shrines in vanilla races, and these make it really hard to compete in many situations, just because like of the setback that you can get put when you reach a dead end in a vanilla race. And a vanilla race is just a race that doesn't go to Void League, so non-descent champions, and non-endless ledge. So playing a vanilla race when you hit like that dead end and you got to backtrack like 3 minutes, and that happens a couple times. Keeping that in mind, like right then and there, you just lost another level that you could have gained in farm time just from something completely out of your hands. And that, from a competitive point of view, it's very frustrating, and it's not that great to deal with. So I'm not the only one that's frustrated with corrupt zones. Like I know
It's
you've
just
been
like
doing a
running
bit.
into one, like just finding one
Yeah,
is not even going into
like
them. Just be like,
exactly. You just say you hit lower submerged, and you're like, oh, I can go this way. I keep going left, and then it goes left and left, and then it's like, oh, you see that red ore by a door, and it's dead end. Bam, 2 minute run back to where you got to go to your upper submerged. In 2 minutes like that, 2 minutes in an hour on like a vanilla race, that can be half a level, 3/4 of a level, depending on your farm time. So having those in a race is very frustrating for a competitive point of view, just because of the amount of time lost that you literally have no control over. Have you had much experience like with those corrupts in races, Hedgie?
Oh man, this is actually the first race season that I've participated in. I mean, I'm having a blast, but I'm really tending to stray away because I can sympathize on, burst racing or the 1 hour turbo. I do participate in those, but I've chosen that those are just races that I'm going to avoid because knowing the map layout is one thing, but adding a corrupted zone, that is so freaking frustrating. Like I understand exactly what you're talking about. But
They're
with
very
that being said,
unpredictable.
what season do you think was the most competitive? When was racing at its biggest challenge?
I
Like
would
what season?
say, for me personally, probably halfway through 5 and 6. Like there was a lot of there's a few rangers, and the competitiveness, like there was no corrupt enshrines back then. There was a lot of races where there was a lot of incentive to push to Act 3. And like that to me is really good because when you go to Act 3 in a race, there's many actions that you need to do, and that allows to create a gap between players. Just because you have to do processes, and all like each player will handle these processes differently. So that it's really healthy for competitiveness, just because it's based on player action and reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they threw in like the shrines and the corrupts, it's just like another RNG factor that you have no control over, and you can literally lose 5 to 10 minutes like, just for them being there. Like a good example is on a burst race. A good start for me, I can get like a 7 minute, maybe like an 8 minute ledge, and sometimes I won't even get ledge till like 10 minutes, or maybe till there's only a couple minutes left of the race, and that's like it's really just frustrating to deal with. Um,
The worst feeling is getting that acceleration shrine at the end, right before you're about to hit mud flats. It's just like, why wasn't this at the beginning? And I've
yeah,
seen, man, those shrines seem to be like feast or famine. Like you either get three, none, or like one that's completely useless. And then you just see people just flying by, min-maxing those levels because
yeah.
they're
But even
just
if you
super
find
lucky.
one shrine, like even if it's a junky shrine that's so much experience, at least I would think, and
yeah.
it's better than finding a corrupted zone.
Oh,
Well, it depends.
definitely.
If you find it at the end, it's useless.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Find that Excel shrine at the end of Coast, and you just want to run backwards with it. Another thing is the Descent Champions signature race of this season. There was a new unique called Blood of Summer introduced, and this was a massive change to the race. This made it for a lot of the top casters. The placement just really comes down to sheer monster spawns, and that where something that determines your placement is just monster spawns. That's really unhealthy to me. Like that you can play your best and somebody will be better than you just because they got a bit luckier. That like that is a bit disheartening, keeping that in mind. But these swords, what they did was, to the race specifically, is they removed the choice between crafting your weapons and your armor and like your jewelry. So the itemizing choice is now gone, because you can dedicate like all your orbs to your jewelry and your armor just to get like max life and res, and you just face roll the whole way with the swords. Like they're really really strong. Like they're a lot of fun to use. I've even used them, but from a competitive point of view, they just remove a lot of the player decision making, and I feel like it makes it almost too easy. But maybe that's the point. Like that's how they want the uniques. If so, like the other ones really need a buff.
So, do
Um,
you mind clarifying with me? Because I personally have not seen this sword. What exactly does it do?
all right,
Gives
so
you a
the
frenzy
main thing
charge.
about the sword is it can give frenzy charge on kill, and it gives one to max frenzy charge. It also gives move speed per frenzy charge.
Oh,
So when you
wow.
two of these swords equipped, you get 5 frenzy charges, you get 40% area damage, 40% move speed uptime. So you basically have a better permanent Quicksilver the whole time. That like on top of your move speed boots and your Quicksilver, you just fly. Like you move so
So
fast.
you like
It's
on a
incredible.
flame blast character, would you use this and just like melt everything?
Yeah, exactly. You go caster, you Ice Nova, Fire Trap, Fireball, whatever, Storm Call. Then once you get Flame
Hmm.
Blast, it's just like the whole room is a Flame Blast.
Wow,
See,
that's
And
just insanity.
I think like for me at least from the noob racer, I've never really been interested in racing because the learning curve, like I recognize the learning curve is, very, very high as far as how you want to min max at different stages and different points and layouts. Knowing layouts is huge an advantage, but that Descent Champions to me is one of the most fun adrenaline rushing events, that I've had in PoE. And it's definitely piqued my interest because now that like you were saying, I don't have to use the currency to buff my weapons. I can just that's two less items that I need to focus on, and I can dump currency into other places, which is less stuff for me to micromanage. And it also is super empowering when you're like trying to keep up momentum because I love momentum based synergy of play and, you know, not letting your frenzy stacks drop so that you can consistently have that movement speed. And just transitioning from Ice Nova, Storm Call, Flame Blast, and it's just super fun. They got me hooked on racing, definitely, but I can understand why, a lot of the other racers are feeling that, dynamic where it's just not balanced.
yeah,
So, what
they're really
suggestions do
powerful.
you have, Terry, to like to fix this? Like, what is like
For
just
the
remove the corruption zones altogether in racing?
I talked to Uber and he had a good suggestion where there was like a blood trail or just some kind of trail that indicates you're going to a corrupt zone, so players have the choice to like pursue and go there if they want to do the corrupt zone or not, or just run right by it and continue with their progression. And I think that would be nice. It might only need to be like race specific or like removing them. Of course, it is an option, but I feel like just maybe having a trail or just some way to indicate that that's where you're headed to is a really good way to like fix that. And for Descent Champions, it's hard to say because we don't necessarily know how GGG wants like players to progress and do in that race. If those swords are where they want players to be, then the other uniques definitely need a buff. But
Right.
if not, I mean, you can always like remove one of the swords from the chest. This has been suggested a lot, and it's actually a really good idea. Is to make one of the swords just a quiver. Like that is something the ranger could really
Oh,
use in that
wow.
race. That would be so good for Roa.
What are you talking about? The bow is amazing for Roa.
All right, well, I have to ask, has there been any like documented case where like a high level guy would actually step into a corrupted zone? Like if the time has like 30 seconds left, is it worth going in? Like,
That's
have you ever
about
been in one?
maybe once or twice, to be honest. Once was in Sarn, and I just went out right away because the monsters were too dangerous. But to me personally, when I see somebody enter a corrupt zone, I just think they do it so their name pops up on the screen.
Look at me, everybody. I'm important.
Swag.
See
Like,
that name, guys?
that's honestly,
Screenshot.
that's what I think it is.
It's like when
Oh,
people
But
go to like Thicket, the Dread Thicket or whatever that side zone is by Oak.
trying
Why
to
is
get
that
their
guy there?
show. But
that's
another thing
awesome.
too is roughly a third of the races this season award points for dying. And like I'm not saying that's necessarily bad for competitiveness, but if you look at the overall ladder, there's a lot less definite gaps between like positions, and like that to me can reflect like some people might do better in those races where you get points for dying just because I don't know they can play more aggressive, and if they get lucky they can take full advantage of that and just smash through it. I just noticed like a trend, or if you look at like the overall points, you can just kind of see like there's a lot less gaps in between.
You can have a higher chance to get a better reward for the more risk you take, but the risk isn't so bad because if you die, you still keep what you have. I get what you mean.
Yeah, exactly. What's up?
Nothing. Go ahead.
I was just going to talk a little bit quickly about the class balance and progression on Descent Champions, because this is a little bit of an issue. And one of the things is single target abilities could be more balanced. Like Sign, for example, you get Viper Strike, but I've crafted like a 3 to 6 cold damage sword, and I've killed Brutus faster with that than I have with Viper Strike. So Viper Strike, you can definitely use it for single target, but it's not as good as like those classes that get like Heavy Strike or Fireball for single target. And I think balancing a single target ability and like the AoE abilities is a good step in the right direction, just so they can have maybe like, similar progressive speeds, unless that's something that they want to have like difference between classes.
Like a double strike instead of Viper Strike. Ugh.
Yeah, there could be a bit better gem balancing across the classes.
Mm-hmm.
But like overall, I really feel like there needs to be a balance between like fun and competitiveness. But there needs to be a definite line that this is a fun race, this is a competitive race. This is where players that have been doing this race for a long time, like their skill and their experience will show. Like from a vanilla race, for example, you have like a series of steps that you repeat each time, and you get very familiar and comfortable with these steps. But when they throw all these like corrupt zones and shrines at you, it can be very frustrating to reflect on your personal performance when these other RNG factors are taking like so much time, or they're adding so much extra stats or damage to your character with the shrine. So it just might have to do with like a bit of the consistency has been removed from those vanilla races, and it's been tough to have a lot of consistent results since just from those extreme RNG factors.
In case you guys were wondering, Terry is talking about the signature race, which is in the previous seasons it was a fixed seed where the shrines were always the same. The only thing that was different was the mob density every time you entered that map, but the map was always the same map. They changed it this season to make a Descent Champions the signature race, so there is no fixed seed. So Terrex feels this season is inconsistent because of that. Sorry to interrupt.
Well, it's all good. Yeah, the consistency is definitely gone, and it's really hard to like apply yourself when you want to learn and progress and get better. And then there's a lot of other factors that remove something like from your hands, or a lot of other factors that you don't always have to deal with all the time. And that makes it hard to find those specific weaker areas or your stronger points, so you can kind of know where to focus on to improve. Like the overall competitiveness, to me it takes away a bit of the seriousness to it, just because keeping in mind, say I get like 2 or 3 corrupts in a race, and average Brutus time for me on a vanilla race, say 16-7 minutes. Sometimes I'll get like a 21-minute Brutus just from the corrupts. And that's a level or like a half lost farming later on.
Jeez. So you provided solutions to both to fix these. You know, like that blood trail by Uber. That is like one of the best things I've ever heard.
Oh, yeah, that'd be really, really helpful.
And it's simple to code. It's easy for them to implement, and they could just make it race only. You know, in the event of you actually wanting to do corrupted zones, if you have that secret thing no one knows about in racing, which I doubt, you know, you could still do it. The option's there, but you know you're walking to one.
That fix alone would solve so much like frustration, and it would be the best. I really want that. Just some way to help you deal with it, just some indication to let you know. That's basically all I have for the competitiveness. The competitiveness tone, it's definitely taken a hit just from like a few RNG factors like corrupt zones, shrines, a few uniques that remove a lot of player processes and steps involved. But there's always ways, I feel like, to make up for it. And hopefully we will see some positive changes for Season 9.
It's freaking, you know, I don't do enough racing, but like this season, like I really liked rewards and I was going to go ham, but then I just like, I don't know, I just couldn't get into it again. Maybe it's just me.
You should have tried to send champions as a witch or a Templar. I think that would have been, it's so fun. It's so fun.
There's nothing like it.
Yeah, there is nothing like it. It's like driving a Dodge Viper. It's awesome.
So, you got any other qualms before we go into the next one, there, Terry?
Oh no, that's all good.
All right. So, overall, Terry seems to be, I'm guessing, about 75 negative to 25 positive on this season racing. Probably just the
Yeah,
rewards
about
you love. All right, so the next thing we're going to discuss is the patch notes overall, and this is going to be a group discussion where I want everybody to chip in their 2 cents. Okay, so I want to kick it off first. The first thing I want to discuss is the new intelligence skill Ball Lightning. We waited in for it. We requested it a million times on Reddit. We're like, give us that thing that Piety has. You know, and it's a slow projectile. Everyone was hyped about it when it was accidentally released at the beginning of SOTV. But now that it's out, it's fairly underwhelming. Why do you think it's underwhelming, Hedgie?
Oh man, I tried so hard to make it work. I mean, I had an like unlimited amount of currency. I spent 3 to 4 days leveling it up to get to 16. Now it's actually 20, and it's still really, really underwhelming. I had high hopes, and I think the main factor that really kind of put it into the ground is not only its damage values, but the fact that you can't shotgun with it. And definitely think that's something that the game needs more of, like being abilities that you're able to shotgun. If it was going to be at that low damage, I definitely think it was warranted. But I can see how stuff like Mjolnir's is always going to be a check, to see how strong they can make ball lightning. Because if you've seen that screenshot,
Oh
I saw
yeah.
someone using that Mjolnir, and it's just like 100 ball lightnings, like literally on the screen. Yeah, it could be very, very powerful. However, I've tried it with 20/20 gems, low life pain attunement shafts, max crit multi, dual void battery, and I still can't make it feel good. Yes, it can take down bosses, pretty decently, but I feel like Glacial Cascade does a much better job, and it freezes, so it keeps you safer. It was just I was really really hyped, and then like just praying and that I could find some combination. I tried using reduced duration or reduced projectile speed, thinking that it was going to be awesome, but it wouldn't even reach the edge of the screen. And what it did was just really really underwhelming. Like I could run faster, and the mob still wouldn't die. Like I would run faster than the ball, and I would just sit there and wait for it to finish its course. So I had high hopes for reduced projectile speed doing wonders for that skill gem, but it just didn't.
Do you like
But
my biggest thing is I think they just made the damage too low, and like almost every single lightning skill with the exception of a lightning warp and discharge, it's a 4% crit. And I understand the power of crit when you crit with a lightning ability, but come on, we need a crit lightning ability. Like you got Storm Call's quality that gives you crit, but still that base is 4%. So really, the crit chance you're getting from the quality is only going into the 4%. Like if you're gonna have a
Yeah.
damage that low, make the crit chance higher or something to complement it. That's what I think. How
It
about you,
just
so with
Terry?
doesn't even
the
come. Oh, go ahead.
with lightning ball and its or ball lightning in its current state, if you could shotgun with it, would you say it would be too strong?
Yeah. Well, yes,
Mm,
if you're using Mjolnir. No, if you're self-casting.
the only way to make it so the shotgunning wouldn't be broken is make it so LMP and GMP aren't affected by it. Because then you could still shotgun because it'll hit multiple times. It just won't be ridiculous. And I think that was the problem they had because upon initial release, you were watching these videos of like day one, day two when people were getting these ball lightnings in the beginning of SOTV, and it was insane. So obviously they had to I think they might have just overcompensated for it, and I do expect a buff in the future. Unfortunately, things like Mjolnir do exist, so whenever something gets released, they always have to constantly tune things around in unique rather than the skill gem itself, and that's kind of disheartening. But I do
Yeah.
expect Ball Lightning to get a buff at some point. But
Yeah.
Arc is still the go-to.
Definitely, there's no point in using Ball Lightning when you have something as good as Arc. And what makes Arc so nice is that it chains. And just having that chain makes your character feel so much more fluid. Whereas Ball Lightning feels like Glacial Cascade, but Lightning, you have a lane that you pump, the ball in, and that's the lane of destruction. However, as far as clear speed, you're having to draw way too many lanes to cover an AoE pack. Even using increased AoE, it didn't feel good. It didn't feel like it was, coming out of, piety or whatever. And, we're all like super devastated when we saw that GMP piety in a shrine. But I definitely think it's going to get buffed. Even if they double its current damage, I still don't think it would be where it needs to be because it would do really good lane damage, but not good clear damage as far as like AoE.
And whenever they release something new, like look at Flame Surge, they'll be like, yeah, the damage is good, but you have to be really close range because of conk effect. People are always going to compare a new skill gem to one in its current state. I mean, Arc used to be a support gem, for God's sakes. It's like a summoner or procking EE. And now it's like self-cast Arc everywhere, Arc totems everywhere. And it's awesome that they made that dynamic shift. It's just when you release a new gem and the hype is there and everyone on Reddit was pumped, everyone on the forums was pumped, and then it's just like underwhelming. People investing all this money into it.
It probably had some degree of people having extra hype and then it coming out like underwhelming. That made the gap seem that much bigger. I definitely think it's due for some kind of buff, and I can see, GGG, they were wanting to play it safe. So when they do release something that, well, I'll ask Chris later what he thinks about it, but I have a feeling that they're okay with doing buffs rather than releasing something that's powerful and taking it away and then hearing all the outcry.
Yeah, that's
people
a
will
good
be
point.
much happier to hear, oh yeah, it got buffed, or instead of,
Definitely.
oh, it got nerfed, I just spent all this currency, just the outcry would be
much
real, I
friendlier.
think. Hmm.
So, with all the negative hype around Ball Lightning, there's a lot of positive around Spell Echo. So, Spell Echo is a new support gem that got released. Basically, it's the only more cast speed multiplier in the game, and it doubles your cast. So, for skills like those really fast skills, it's insane with, or even those like really hard hitting beefy skills, it's great with because now you got two of them. The only negative of it is it's 10% less overall damage, but you get the positive you get from it far outweighs the negative of Spell Echo. What are your experiences with it, Terry? You got any experiences?
I actually haven't used Spell Echo yet. I'm not too big on the caster. I love my Cycloner, but like I've seen it in action with especially EK, and it was pretty crazy with EK.
How about you, Hedgie, then?
I think at the minimum, even if you're an attack-based character and not self-cast, it definitely changed the cast Enduring Cry. Being able to get a double dip Enduring Cry with it, every 4 seconds is huge.
Oh
Not
yeah.
only easily extending your Immortal Call, it's definitely changed the meta of PvP. Just that one gem, everything feels differently, and everybody is running Spell Echo Enduring Cry. I mean, you're silly if you don't run it because it's so insanely powerful. Getting that 4 second
That's
physical immunity.
All right, I'm gonna
that's where I had
knock
my
you two into the
experience.
ground. You're gonna open up with EK and Enduring Cry and not talk about Arc and Incinerate. I mean, come on. Incinerate
Incinerate's definitely good.
is the most insane thing and the most fun thing I've ever played in this game. The fact that you get your tri-stat quicker and it costs less mana, it's easy to sustain, and now you're doubling your cast, more than doubling your cast speed with it. So you have that tri-stack and it's just melting everything. I mean, I was killing bosses in 3 seconds flat. End game bosses with that, no problem. And then, of
Definitely.
course, Arc. You can imagine the numbers that Arc is throwing out with that thing.
Yeah, I
But
definitely like the shift to with Freeze Pulse because you're actually, getting more options for even more machine gunning of casts. And yeah, like what Amphibitin is saying in chat, it destroys faster casting. Yeah, I definitely agree. But even if you want to go further than what Spell Echo provides and add an additional fast cast, this is just insane. You can
Mm-hmm.
become like a machine gun caster, which I think is very, very interesting.
Now, the thing with faster casting and Spell Echo, it's situational now. Things like Incinerate, Firestorm, faster casting I still think is a mandatory gem, mainly because of things like Sybil's Paw. And the reason for that is it's a more multiplier, so faster casting gen gets a benefit from it. You're using
Hmm.
GMP, the quality of that is also increased cast speed. And if you're using Sybil's Paw, that is so much life gain on hit with it. It is just it's a mandatory. So also, like I did an incinerator with 3 dragons. So the fact that I can keep my try shock stack up at all times because of that faster casting gem with Echo is very important.
so with Spell Echo, would you say it's like a new standard, kind of like multi-strike is for a lot of melee builds, that Spell Echo is going to be one of like the always go-to supports, or where would you not use Spell Echo aside from like a Mortal Call?
Though I wouldn't use Spell Echo in in a burn spec, like a discharge burning spec, because obviously discharge you need to have the charges,
Upfront.
and it's all about the upfront damage. You don't want to nerf it. Or cast speed doesn't really take a point into it. Or same thing, like I played like a Burning Nova build before, where you make your Ice Nova either with the new Pyre Ring or 3 Dragons or Cold to Fire. There's so many different ways you can make it burn now, which is awesome. I feel like it's anything upfront damage igniting, Echo is really bad with.
Mm-hmm.
So anything that you want to just deal that one single hit with and be done with it.
You got it.
Right. There's like a couple of useless stuff, like you don't want to use it with Immortal Call, obviously. Curses, it's redundant, But I can't think of many front payload casting skills that I wouldn't use it as the very first gem that I would want.
You can use it with Val gems though. Like Val Ice Nova is like I heard was one of the better Val gems now because of it. The fact that you can get 2 chains of Ice Nova going at once is pretty awesome.
I bet.
Yeah, I used it with Val Arc or Spark.
Oh yeah.
Spell Echo Enduring Cry in Apex or Uber, even the second boss, when you got to go in there and keep up your endurance charges. Like doing Uber without it, like it can be frustrating. Your Enduring Cry desyncs, your Immortal Call desyncs, you don't get charges when you use it. And then you go in there with Spell Echo and it's just like, oh, it's a breeze keeping up your charges now. It's really good.
Yeah, it's really insane. It's definitely changed PvP. I know all the PvPers are leveling them up just because they want that feature. But I also love that the fact that they put all the cast times in the skill gem. Now people can actually visually see how long the animation is going to take to get the spell off.
All right, so there's Val Righteous Fire and Val Lightning Trap. I have very little experience with both. Actually, I have no experience. Not even going to fabricate that one. Val Lightning Trap, I think it's kind of cool. You can probably Shocking Ground is what it does now, and I think it does a little bit more damage. And you could stack it 3 times. I think it's fairly underwhelming. I don't see very many people using it.
Yeah, it's extremely underwhelming. I've seen people try to use it. It's not good.
The only time I would ever use it is maybe with Chain, just so that way you can have Shocking Ground all over the place, but it's just Shock instead. Go Arc. And then Val Righteous Fire seems like really gimmicky, fun, but too risky. Oh man.
I saw Willy Wonka. He played with a party one time. It looked really fun what he was doing. He had Val Pact and he was just going around, blasting everything on the screen every time he had a charge. The problem he had was getting to the point where he could fill it up. He definitely relied on a group, but he was extremely powerful. And he did some testing, trying to kill himself with a degen or whatever. I don't think he had any luck. I think he stayed alive for players take additional chaos damage or, because it sets you to 1. And his HP bar was kind of conflicting because you would see 1 and then you would see full. And you're just like, whoa, which one is it? Is he going to die? Is he going to die?
Right. So
yeah,
it's gimmicky.
Kind of yeah.
It's the YOLO move, literally. So let's talk about EK, Ethereal Knives, or Ethereal Knives, depending on how edgy you are. It got its damage overall, its physical base damage was nerfed by 20%. However, they made it cast 25% faster. So it's less damage up front, but you could get it more consistently. This is a buff to it. They also made the mana cost match that of the cast speed, so it's at the end of the day, it's the same amount. Let's talk if you guys think this is a buff or a nerf. Terry, is this a buff to EK or a nerf?
I think it can go both ways depending on the monster that you're hitting with it. Like the base damage on EK, since it was doing physical, was really high physical, and when you hit with physical damage, a lot of the time they would get stunned, and that was a lot of survivability, keeping monsters stun locked with your EK. But on the other hand, a lot of people don't like those slow casting, sluggish feeling characters. So I guess it can be a positive and a negative. I think overall it's more positive just for a much smoother, faster feel.
And so for a PvE aspect, it's positive. It's just you're not chunking like you used to. Hedgie,
exactly.
what are your takes on EK? I know you're gonna drop the PvP bomb. Let's hear it.
Yeah, it nerfed my PvP build because I use it on a trap. So reducing its damage but increasing its cast. There's no cast speed related to dropping a trap and having it proc. If someone steps on it, they're gonna get hit by it. And because of the front payload is reduced, I didn't really need the mana reduction. I mean, it's nice because I could, I guess, essentially run a higher level Arctic armor. But in PvE, it definitely makes it more viable in my eyes because most EK users are going to be running Eldritch Battery Arctic armor, and on Reflect, if your hits are for hitting, they're hitting less, and your armor is going to have more of an impact, and your Arctic armor is going to, feel a lot better. On top of that, you don't only have one frontline, payload, you have two, so that your second one will be mitigated by Immortal Call, when it's physical reflect. So that's like a huge, huge bonus to making it feel really nice. Along with the fast cast, at first people didn't like it because it just felt so slow when it released from your character. But with that fast cast improvement and the fact that you can reduce the damage that you take from reflect by both Immortal Call and less, heavier hitting hits, I think it's a really good change for PvE.
Something that neither of you addressed that I want to bring up about EK. Yes, they nerfed the physical damage, but they increased the cast speed pretty noticeably. When you're increasing the base cast speed, things like Echo and Faster Cast are even more beneficial to you. Think about like when you have like a 1.6 dagger and you get 9% attack speed on it. It's going to give you much more of an impact than if you have like a 1.1 with 9% attack speed on it. Same thing goes with these spells. Now, the biggest thing that we didn't bring up is damage effectiveness. They didn't touch the damage effectiveness. They made it faster casting with the same 100% damage effectiveness. So if you use added cold, which you're not, I'll just be honest, added chaos, you probably might, and added lightning, you might consider as well. Those are not affected at all by the change to cast speed. So those actually got a massive buff to EK because you're pumping out EKs quicker. So things like added chaos and added lightning are actually more beneficial to you now than they ever were before. Bad math? Oh, well, sorry.
That's a good call, though.
So
getting out those extra damage modifiers.
This damage effectiveness remains the same, which means added chaos and added lightning are not affected, which means you're pumping them out quicker and hitting harder because of that. That is something. That's at least what I like to think about EK.
Yeah, but those are mostly going to be flat. They're not going to scale like with your tree. I feel like, adding increased physical with like Empower and stuff. I mean, I think it's a good cheap alternative until you can get a proper Empower. But, going crit and crit chance and, crit Empower plus added fire, I think those are going to be much better contenders. But, yeah, when you tack on flat chaos damage, you usually don't spec into the tree where it's going to scale it. Same thing with the added lightning.
Spell damage will still scale it. Overall, just flat spell damage, and Spell Echo provides spell damage, and you're pumping out faster casts with it now. So it's actually going to have a huge benefit because Spell Echo, faster casting with it, as well as added chaos, without a damage effectiveness. I think it would be nice. The biggest problem though is, as V-Rock just said, EK damage is pretty much solo play. And you get in a group, I think I even heard the term, you feel like you're throwing toothpicks. So EK is still not where it needs to be. We just spent 5 minutes talking about it, but that's the bottom line for me. I think that overall it was a good attempt, but you still airballed. That's my honest opinion.
But when we talk about scaling, I mean, when we're talking about spell damage from a tree or we're talking about critting, I mean, there's a big difference from getting a percentage buff versus a multiplicative buff.
Right.
So I think scaling crit is always, and EK makes for a good crit build, especially when you go low life. It can do some pretty sick damage. I've seen some tooltips of upwards of 58k, no problem. Even if you go super crazy, I think you can get to like 80 to 90k on EK. However, you are super susceptible to reflect. So that's when it becomes really, really dodgy.
Good point.
That's what always killed me on my EK Shadow is reflect.
All right, so that's the overall take on the patch notes. Overall, Spell Echo is amazing. You got a very gimmicky Val Righteous Fire. Val Lightning Trap is all right at best. And then Ball Lightning, I feel overall the community, as well as everybody in here, is just pretty underwhelmed by it, especially after all the hype that it received and that little teaser we got by accident. But that pretty much concludes the patch notes for the most part.
We're forgetting one big change.
Let's hear it.
Raging Spirits. Raging Spirits got a buff.
Good
Yeah,
call
big
on that.
buff. And from what I've heard from the LLD players is that Raging Spirits is super OP, and it even got 21% better. And at the higher levels, it's 66% more damage, which is pretty cool. I saw Willie. He also tested a barrage cast on crit Raging Spirits, and it seemed to do pretty well. I mean, granted, for how much his gear was worth, it's arguable, but I mean, it definitely was interesting and fun.
It's
Maybe it
new.
can be pushed.
It's
Yeah, it's
something
definitely
new to
new.
do.
Yeah. And it's nice as an archer to have something hold your aggro for you, you know, because you're constantly pumping out those Raging Spirits, and since they're in front of you, constantly spawning, it was definitely cool to watch. But Raging Spirits, I'm glad to see that change. Hopefully, we'll see it, and I don't know what it's going to do to LLD. They're probably saying, "Oh my God, it's broken," you know, nerf it, nerf it, nerf it. But we'll see. I don't know. Do they? How many cases do you find yourself using Raging Spirits in racing? Like just Turbo Brutus, right?
Yeah, Turbo Brutus. That's about it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Stream of Monsters. The change we've all been waiting for. This is a minor change, but it's like, yes, they finally come out.
Another minor change that was huge quality of life, the increased spawn speed of the ambush chests.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure everybody's thankful for that. It's just a huge pain in the butt just to sit there and wait for one mob, and definitely wasn't less fun. You know, that fun factor was kind of
Hedgie, I love you,
destroyed by
man,
that.
but I literally just said that.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
You're good, man. All right, so Chris just came online. We're going to go into intermission mode right now, so hang tight, everybody. And when we come back, Chris Wilson will be here to answer your questions. So hang tight.
And ours, yeah.
Oh, yeah, and ours. All right, we're back, everybody. We got Chris Wilson here, the lead developer of Grinding Gear Games. How you doing,
Hey
Chris?
guys, I'm doing well, thanks.
All right. In case you guys were wondering, Path of Exile, again, it's a free-to-play game. You can find it on pathofexile.com or Steam, and it's an action RPG, you know, that dungeon crawler action, hack and slash type feel. So without further ado, here goes, Chris. Hedgie, you want to start it off?
Yeah, sure. I'll ask my questions. Um, After extensive use with ball lightning, it seemed really underwhelming. An underwhelming skill on release, even with the best endgame gear. With paint attunement, shafts, in legacy crit, all the best stuff. Are the future of the new gems going to share the same introduction so that they are buffed instead of nerfed?
When we introduce skill gems, we try to make sure that we have a few powerful builds that the balance team have put together so that they know that players can at least like there'll be some builds that work well with the gem, and they had like several builds with ball lightning that were enough that we were confident that it wouldn't be too underpowered, but it was still introduced at a slightly lower level than we had it in various testing phases. And this is partly because it's really destructive if we release a gem that's way too powerful, and there's a couple of consequences of this. The first one is the longer you leave it without changing it, the more like a larger portion of the player base switches to it. And this happened with the custom damage taken fiasco just after release, where you had some ridiculously high percentage of the community relying on custom damage taken in a really, really overpowered state. And that was one of the few balance changes that we did when we fixed that actually suffered like a large hit in player numbers, because we honestly like damaged quite a lot of characters people were enjoying playing. Anyway, so with Ball Lightning, the balance guys are keeping a really close eye on it, and I'd expect to see changes to it in upcoming patches if the community feels that it's underpowered.
That's what we needed to hear right there. All right, so my question to you, Chris, is last time we spoke, I brought up incentives. Obviously, you can't just throw them right into the game, but there's always that stale, at that last month of the 4-month leagues where people are just craving for that incentive. Have you guys been working on any at all?
So last time I think you discussed having a microtransaction that kicks in at 5 challenges, right?
Yeah, like a progressive, like after every 3 or 5, however you guys choose to do it, and then expanding the amount of challenges there are out there. Sort of like a
So
legacy option.
we've been looking at the design of the challenges for the new challenge leagues, and it's likely we're going to try to go with 8 again. And it was basically a foregone conclusion that we'd have something in there, like a microtransaction which everyone can get if they complete 5 challenges, for example. And the question really was, what do we do to incentivize people to go for 8? Because, I mean, Carl's talked a little bit about this on the forum or Reddit, I believe, but it's really hard pitching the 8th challenge, which is always the item acquisition one, because if you make it too hard, then you have a situation with Sacrifice of the Val where you really have to do quite a lot of effort and trading and grinding in order to get the 8th challenge. And we don't want it to be that hard. Like, we want more than 20 people to be winning this. The issue, of course, is if we make it too easy and you have thousands of people win it, it causes a problem if we've promised, like, an internationally shipped high-quality T-shirt from the company. And it's not at all about, the cost of the T-shirts, really. But at the same time, we're wanting to provide correct incentive there. And so we're looking at different things for the new challenges. And an idea that we're tossing up, and, don't write me hate mail if you don't like it, because we're still discussing it, but an idea we're tossing up, for example, is to introduce a microtransaction you get at 5 challenges and a microtransaction you get at 8 challenges, and make the 8th challenge marginally easier, to the point where like a couple of hundred people are getting it rather than 10. And the first X people will receive a T-shirt, because that way there's still a competitiveness that people really want to be the first to achieve it. And we potentially, if we misbalance the achievement and 1,000 people win it, it's not the end of the world. So that's what's happening with the challenge incentives, at least. As for the rest of the upcoming expansion, a lot of it is about giving people reward for behavior much earlier than they normally would get it in the cycle.
That's freaking awesome. That is amazing news for incentives right there. I hope the community is pumped about that. My second question for you is, I was asked by one of my viewers. You think about other games, they're microtransaction cards in like retail stores. Do you think Path of Exile will ever make that shift? Like have a $20 card, because some people, they want to pay cash, opposed to the online the online way of buying microtransaction points. Do you think that is something Path of Exile will ever do?
So we've talked to a few companies about this, and because of the logistics of the store, like having to pay sales tax and having the premium, space where the card sits being relatively expensive, and the fact there's a distribution company and physically manufacturing these cards, and then there's a company that brokers it and distributes it out to all, like arranges the distribution to all the stores and so on, the actual game company gets a really tiny cut And I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but it's not a large amount. It's one of those things where you sell a $20 card to a user and you're not getting many dollars out of that. And it'll vary, of course, depending on how good the partner is. Now, this is worthwhile for a lot of games because it means that your game it's got its big like icon and logo front and center in stores like 7-Elevens and supermarkets all around the world. That by itself is massive advertising. So it's something we're considering, but it's not a particularly high priority thing. Put it this way, if we were doing it, it would be more to get Path of Exile's brand out there than to actually make money from the point sales, because if you want to make money from the point sales, selling them yourself makes more.
Great answer. Terry, you got any questions for Chris?
All right, my first question is, what is the process involved in making race and balance changes?
So we have several guys in-house who... Sorry, you should finish the question. Go on.
Just like for race balance changes, like when we go into, say, Season 9, like what's going to be done to like change a vanilla race or like classes in particular to like affect their performance in a race?
So with the season design, we essentially have a few guys, that'd be Carl and Rory and Mark, and to some extent Nick, who have various degrees of racing expertise. And it's important to have a wide range of different expertise in there. I mean, like, Mark is a very, very competitive racer, and the other guys have raced to some extent. And we basically get them to look through a lot of data and to talk to a lot of community members who race and work out what it is that we can change about the next season that keeps it interesting without necessarily like breaking the bank on programmer budget. Now, to some extent, we occasionally want to incentivize racing a lot more, and we come up with something like Descent or Descent Champions. They take quite a lot of effort to make, and I'd love to do another one in the future. We don't have it planned for the next season, and discussion hasn't yet started about Season 9, but typically the process is that we have a look at the feedback from the last season and try to act on a decent portion of it, and it's important that the signature race is mixed up from season to season. Like, a lot of people love the pure vanilla signature races that are just a test of skill of how far you can get in X minutes, and that's really good, but we don't want to just repeat that back to back, so that's why we occasionally throw in a Descent race as a signature race.
Okay, so like all the XP gains and like the data on other websites where like player gets X XP in X time, like a lot of that information gathered is like checked out on making like these accurate changes for like the overall class balance.
We haven't recently made class balance changes related specifically to racing. We typically put the core game first. So for example, if we're choosing the starting skill for a class, we will do it because 99% of the players who play the core game are going through that class. Having said that, we definitely take racing into account, and I think that there's some relatively extensive changes in the passive tree that are going in 1.2.0, and I'm pretty sure the guys mention racing relatively frequently when they're working on that, so it's definitely being considered. But one thing to note with the racing is, let's say there was one incredibly overpowered class. Well, because the rewards, of course, per class are limited, players do have the choice of doing well in that class or doing well in a different class, and it may mean it's easier to get 1,000 points in one class if we've done a horrible job with balancing, but it does mean that you can choose another class if you want an easier way to get demis in that class if you're a good racer.
I like that.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the worst case
question.
scenario, assuming we screwed it up. Go.
All right, the next question is there any requirement in which we see the rewards like chosen for races, or are there items like we may not ever see as reward, for example, like Voltaxic?
I think that we haven't ruled anything out from being given away as a race reward, but we're very conscious of the fact that some people have invested a lot of exalts in getting their Voltaxic or their Calms, and if we were to slap it in there as a race reward, it could heavily incentivize racing, but that might not be a fair thing for the players who, had to trade X number of exalts in order to get it. So we use race rewards as a good opportunity to introduce cool alternate art. It's very popular with skin transfers. We use it as an opportunity to bring back league-specific uniques from past leagues, which is one way that we can do that. We haven't promised in particular that they won't start dropping in the core game again, just that they're removed for some period of time. But the race rewards are a great way to reintroduce them into the economy at a relatively controllable rate while providing a steady incentive. But, I mean, put it this way, if we were to introduce, say, Shavs or something as a race reward, it would certainly see an uptick in racing. And that, I don't necessarily know that's a good thing. I mean, it has the benefits of getting a lot of players involved, but there might be costs associated with that.
Definitely understandable, and very good way to look at it, just some of the impact what those items might have on people just rushing to 1,000 to get those, or the impact on the economy one of those rare items might have.
So, Hedgie, do you have any other questions you would like to address with Chris?
Yeah, I kind of had other questions, but he kind of already addressed it. But if he wants to go into more detail, one of the questions was, are we going to see as many significant changes in the 1.2.0 skill tree as we did in the start of Invasion and Ambush?
That's what I'm talking about.
I think the guys have spent longer on these skill tree changes that they're working on at the moment. And this started with basically, and I have no idea how much of this is public yet, but this is information I've got from watching it across the other side of the room. I haven't actually been involved in the skill tree changes myself, but they basically started with the witch area because I hadn't had attention for a long time. And since then, they've branched out to cover a lot of the top half of the tree. And there's quite extensive changes. I mean, Rory works on this a lot, gets a lot of feedback from Carl, from Mark, Nick, and Eric is also on the art slash creative side very interested in making sure that the tree not only looks cool but represents the different areas that you're selecting. And so they've been working quite a lot on this for 1.2.0, and it should be very refreshing in terms of the balance of those classes. And I suspect that some of the changes also play into larger balance changes. An example is we're kind of fiddling with life a little bit, and so that's resulted in a slight change to how life is distributed in the tree that affects all the classes. And there may be other small changes related to life in the game.
Oh, that's freaking awesome. We've been waiting for that witch change. We have been dying for it.
Yeah.
That is good news.
It's definitely refreshing for some more theory crafting. But my last question was, can you tell us anything more about the development changes being made to prolong the league's hype duration over time, aside from the microtransaction and challenges? Do you guys have any other plans?
We're discussing switching to 3-month leagues. This isn't finalized.
Wow.
And there are a couple of reasons for this. The first one is that, as you've completely noted, the last month of the leagues is relatively quiet compared to the rest. And so a rough idea that we had was to work on our next expansion being a 6-month duration one with 2 sets of 3-month leagues in there. And the ones that we introduce halfway through would have quite a lot of effort going into very, very cool properties in them. So that's something we're playing with. It gives us a little bit longer to make the expansions, meaning we can pile a lot more stuff in, while meaning that there's 2 very interesting sets of leagues going on throughout that expansion. Now, this, of course, could completely change. Maybe we'll make them longer. Maybe we'll change it in a different way. But the 3-month thing is getting some discussion at the moment, and it seems to address a number of problems. Now, of course, there's the concern that if you run 3-month leagues, maybe people start getting bored at 2.5 months, and you never can really solve the problem that in any kind of long-term league, the last little while has a bit of slowness due to the fact the league is about to end. But it might be an interesting experiment to try over the next 6 months, partly because it gives us an excuse to come up with another cool pair of league mods, which we always like making.
You know what? I applaud you guys for that because at least, most games is just stick on that static, 4-month, 4-month, 4-month. And of course, you're always going to have an influx of players at the beginning of the league. It's maintaining those players, and I'm glad you guys are experimenting and trying new things.
Yeah.
So
I should stress
just
that these kind of things are very hypothetical, right? Like I understand that we have posts on Reddit saying 3-month leagues
Right.
are coming, but if they aren't, then shoot me, right? It's entirely
Right.
a thing that we're working through. But I'm trying to be candid with any non-feature parts of the upcoming expansion. Arbitrary stuff that doesn't really matter for journalists. I'll try to be candid about, especially to get feedback on.
Right. So hypothetically, just to piggyback on this, would it be a flip reverse of the league properties? Like the softcore and hardcore would just switch their roles? Like, would that be the
We're
ultimate
wanting
design to save?
We're wanting actual new properties. Like we're not
Oh,
necessarily
wow.
trying to save development time. Like we can invest the month that it takes to get really awesome properties on the new leagues. It's just a matter of working out what's right to give the artists enough time to come up with some really good new content for the next expansion. And this is kind of like so Sacrifice of the Val took us 4 months, right? And that was 4 months where there was a month of Christmas and stuff in there, which really cuts down the development team size. So it was a real push. And some of the guys in the office worked the hardest they've ever worked in that time. And that was kind of like it was unacceptable for me to push them that hard. And so we had to fix what we did with Sacrifice of the Val. So we started much earlier with the new expansion within the 4-month period. And towards the end, it was apparent that we needed 5 months to do it. So that's why we moved it from July to August. And it's looking really solid. And we're very, very pleased with this expansion. But this kind of time frame where we're having to rush it out in 4 or 5 months, we could do a much better job and pack so much more in by having an extra month of core development in the middle. And that's why we're thinking about a 6-month time frame for the next one.
That's awesome. I will say,
Yeah.
though, have fun not getting that much sleep there, Chris. Those 3 months each. That's freaking awesome. So at this point in time, we're going to go over to the viewer-based questions that we've received through YouTube, the Path of Exile forums, and Reddit. So to kick it off, Hedgie, I believe you're blue, right?
Yeah.
All right.
I'll kick off. This one's like asked by 3 different people, but I feel like they're all pertinent to each other and they're all related. This one's from Trippin. It says, "Does GGG have any plans to attract a larger audience with casual players in mind? If so, what will it be, and what are the ideas behind that?" Jupiter asks, "I would like to know how GGG feels about the complexity creep in PoE." And then Lizard Creep asks, "With the constant additions of new uniques and skills, is there ever going to be a point where the content will have to grow upwards? I realize the desire to not have an invalidate to not invalidate old gear and content, but do you think GGG may eventually have to bring a new tier of base items to support PoE's growth?"
Those are great questions. I'll answer them in reverse. So with regard to content creep, this is something we struggle with because we don't want to content creep upwards. Like if we said to you guys, hey, look, there's all these new base types and all of the rares that you've just spent so much currency on are completely worthless. All your uniques are worthless. Have fun with the new items. You know, that's got some advantages. But at the same time, it kind of upsets everyone. And it also makes a promise that their work is going to be invalidated in the future. Whereas if we try to go sideways like we have been going with the, corruption and sacrifice of the Vaal and various other small changes to the item system, which have large effects, then it means that your good rare, it's still good in Sacrifice of the Vaal. Sure, you may brick it with corruption, but it's still, a rare that's capable of doing the end game. And we have a few small changes to the item system in the new expansion, which can kind of be broadly categorized in 2 categories. But one of these changes is, slight sideways creep in the same way. And we haven't introduced new tiers of base item types that are better than everything. Now, maybe this has to happen in the future if we run out of ways to go sideways, but if so, it's something we'll signal and discuss relatively clearly beforehand. So, yes, content creep, we're trying to go sideways with the power of items rather than upwards, because that would upset a lot of people. What was the second to last question?
The complexity creep was the second to last. The last one was about uniques.
Right.
Think about like the
Uniques and skills.
the what is it? Hrimsaro's gloves versus like Mjolnir. Obviously, one's common, one's not. But like the further we go along with uniques, the more insane they become, and then the other ones kind of get left in the dust.
Yeah, the complexity creep thing. Let's discuss 2 aspects of it. The first one is whether or not new uniques that we introduce are just better than the older uniques that existed in the game. And to some extent this is true and partly driven by supporter-designed uniques, because they want something special and we'll give them something special. It's just that some of the oldest GGG ones kind of fit the niche weird oddity kind of category. And this is something which may see rebalancing of the old uniques. Maybe it won't. It's okay to have some bad items in the game. We just have to make sure to be careful with the drop rates so that you're not overwhelmingly getting bad items. The other part of complexity, of course, is how it affects new players, and I like Path of Exile being a complicated game, right? Like, I would never try to dumb down core mechanics in order to have the game have more new players, but at the same time, those mechanics can be hidden away towards the end game slightly more. Skill gems only start dropping at like level 12 or so, and I think chromatics only drop around there as well. There's small things that we've done to keep the first hour or so of gameplay for a new player relatively clean, and so what we're trying to do, of course, is introduce more complexity with each expansion and patch, while making sure that it's kind of hidden away from the first few levels while players learn the ropes. And we're doing a lot of stuff to help new players. For example, in 1.2.0 we have a tutorial system that's more advanced than the previous one, and we have a different way to do quest tracking, so it's more apparent what your immediate goal is. These are things that we've been working on to really help new players without at all hitting complexity with the nerf bat.
That's something this game has needed forever. The first time you open that passive tree, you're like, what? And I'm glad you guys are adding a tutorial feature.
So overwhelming.
So there was one more question that was before those 2, right?
Yep.
To do with like influx of new players?
You just answered it.
Yeah. Yeah, you pretty much answered that. We wanted to know what was being done as far as development to help transition newer players and, help them understand, as the game becomes more complex, they're struggling to, they're drowning already, and then we're going to toss in more, whereas the player that's been playing forever, it's all very, very easy to get grasp.
That's true.
Terry,
and one solution might just be better articles about this kind of stuff, from both the community and from us, explaining how things work in an easy way.
Right.
So Terry, you're up. Go ahead.
The green one, that's yours, I think.
Yeah.
Or,
Spencer Word is Xenos.
I'll just delete these.
All right.
I'll just ask
Go ahead.
Next one. Is there any chance that the field of view gets fixed so that you can't get a tremendous advantage by playing on 4K or on an ultra-wide screen? Maybe a setting that is fair so everyone can access it?
It's likely that this may see a change in the future, providing it doesn't stop people with legitimate monitor setups. Like, we might just set some reasonable boundaries on it. At the moment, the only thing that's stopping you see too far is the fact the server doesn't serialize entities to you unless you're within a certain distance of them. So if you stretch your window to be very, very wide, you can see quite a long way, which admittedly is, a bit more like a mini map hack because you get quite a lot of view distance on either side. But you don't actually see the monsters and shrines and that kind of stuff until you approach them. And that radius is typically a little larger than a typical screen is, so that you don't ever see monsters pop in unless you're doing very strange aspect ratios. Now, we may cap this. It's relatively easy for people to hack the client and uncap it if we do so. Now, our hack detection stuff will hopefully be able to pick that up, but it's one of those things where it's just kind of a token change in order to just, to slap people on the wrist for doing that, to give them warnings and say to them, please don't alter the aspect ratio beyond certain limits. We'll set up a few multi-monitor machines at the office to see what a reasonable cap would be, I guess.
That's awesome.
Definitely can be used to your advantage, like even in some races, using like Firestorm off screen or just hitting monsters that you normally couldn't see.
All right, so the next one is from Spencer Ward. He says, as we know from the last time Chris was on the podcast, the devs are aware of the mana leech problems. Will we be seeing this problem fixed in 1.2?
I have a note that we need to review Leech in our balance sweep for 1.2, so it's very likely there'll be some discussion. It has currently, well, I mean, it might have changes that I don't know about, but as far as I know, it hasn't been addressed yet. But there's a ton of stuff we still have to tweak in the next month, especially as we get more testing feedback.
All right, that's cool. So the next one from Brahm VD. I'm just going to say that. Are you guys planning on adding different types of ranged weapons? Examples. More ranged weapons could include a split up from the current bow to a light and heavy bow, or a one-handed crossbow with a shield combination, because currently right now it's just bows, and that's it.
I'm pretty sure the guys have plans for more of this kind of stuff in the future, but if they did have specifics, then it wouldn't be something I could reveal. I mean, there's always new weapon types being discussed. It's one of those things that's really fun to throw in an expansion, and I can't confirm or deny any particular ones. But,
we tried, guys.
I'm sure within a couple of years you'll see one. It might not be in the next expansion, but there'll be something at some point.
Yeah, I would like to play a Javazon.
Yeah, javelins versus spears, things like that. Awesome. Terry, you're up.
Next up is from to Burmeister Jensen, and it says, are you going to add a gem that works like Echo or Multi-Strike but on ranged attacks? I think this might, I guess, be similar to like LMP and Chain, but like a Multi-Strike for ranged attacks.
I'm pretty sure that idea is kicking around on our list of support gems that we haven't done yet, where there are little gaps. And to some extent, gaps are interesting because of asymmetry. It causes each type of attack to be slightly different, but in other cases, it's something that we have a plan to fill in the future. I don't have any firm plans around that one that I know of, but I can discuss it with the guys.
All right, the next question is from Origins. He says, when is a fully developed PvP setting going to see the light of day? With 1v1, 3v3 tournaments, prizes, bug fixes, etc., instead of what's currently in place. We needed a competitive PvP scene. Why is it not out yet when they plan on adding it in?
We definitely will be adding the PvP tournament stuff that we've talked about in the past. The date, however, depends on a lot of factors, and it's basically a half-finished feature, which we'd love to finish, and it's not that hard to go from here. It's just quite a lot of work, and we're trying to find the right time to do this, because PvP is the most important thing to a lot of players and completely irrelevant to another set of players. And we have to hit the balance of delivering this so the first set of players can have a lot of fun without disturbing the content schedule for the other group of players, which in many cases is a lot larger. And so we're not making any PvP changes that I'm aware of in the upcoming expansion, but we are trying very hard to finish the PvP tournament stuff, hopefully soon after, if nothing else comes up. I mean, I can't promise that directly, but I'd love to get that feature finished because we've had a lot of development work put into it so far, and it's very cool. Whole schedules of different types of events where you accumulate points, and there's cool PvP-only prizes. I mean, we made a progression of PvP rewards, like race season rewards, that are all sitting there just waiting for us to turn this feature on. And with all the different PvP modes available in the game, from Capture the Flag through dueling and the Sign Arena and the 1v1 and 3v3 matchmaking we have, just having an incentivization and rewards for it will turn it on to a point where players are very excited to start building PvP characters, and that'll mean there's a lot more people playing it, and it'll be really good from there.
All right, the next question is from Null77. How do designers feel about the one-hit approach, in this game. You have one skill for the most part, like 90% of the time you're going to use. And generally speaking, people are more attracted to the move that works for both single target and AoE. Overall, what are you guys' experiences with this? Is that the dynamic approach you're trying to take?
We see players using quite a lot of different skills in aggregate, right? Like I haven't done a build of the week for ages that hasn't had quite a lot of different skills on the bar. And while, yes, many people do build characters where they fire one primary attack, there's a ton of other stuff going on in the background. I mean, maybe that primary attack is triggering three other spells with cast on crit. Maybe they've got some automatic curse on damage taking going on. There's a lot of things, but players use the tools we give them to drive it down to the least amount of work to actually play. They don't want to fiddly have to cast the curses manually on the monsters beforehand if they can avoid it, and so on and so on. So I'm not particularly concerned with the homogeneity of the skill use in the game because it's human nature for players to try to simplify the way that they interact with it. However, we will continue to keep trying to push skills out that have situational use so that players are trying to use that and their primary attack. And honestly, like the bulk of players, 80 or 90%, the ones you don't hear from because they just quietly play, they're using a ton of different skills in roughly equal proportions. It's just that the pro players who have worked out what the exact best skill for their build is happen to be using builds that generally focus around one primary attack skill.
Yeah, I think the most famous would be like the Aegis Aurora, Bringer Rain Cyclone build, Soul Taker. You just literally only have Cyclone on your bar because you have everything else to do. Yeah, it's more about the setup where instead of, the actual pressing of buttons.
All right, next question is from Arbiter.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, you can go.
No, go ahead. I was just saying.
Where do you think an improvement is needed the most aside from trade, or where do you think you can achieve the most with improvements?
Do you mean in terms of general improvements to the game?
Yep.
Right.
Yeah,
in general, aside from trade.
I think that the best answer for that is to wait and see what comes with the expansion next month, because our goal with the expansion is to deliver primary improvements to the game. So the areas that we focus on there are the things that we felt that we could get the best bang for buck in terms of presenting a lot of new fun for players at a relatively sustainable development rate.
All right, the next question comes from Nero Noah. In the forums, I can see two different kinds of players mostly. Spikes, the people that become one of the best players in the ladder, get wealth and do the challenges. They search a challenging game. And the Johnnies, they play the cool build. They try to make a cool build viable at all costs. They try to search new combinations. They search a game that encourages re-rolling and creativity. How do you balance to satisfy both? The game seems to be more about satisfying the Spikes than the Johnnies. Actually, you can get really punished for trying to be creative and make something different. What do you think about that?
This is a question that Carl would love to answer, I'm sure, but he's not here right this exact second. So with unique design, it's very easy to build uniques for Johnnies. Now, these are the uniques that people often say are bad uniques, right? You release it and people say, well, that was terrible. I'm never going to wear that. That's worse than running a rare in that slot, the 50% percentile rare, for example. And so these uniques get overlooked, and then a Johnny finds them and realizes the cool combo we were planning. And sure, some of these are powerful and obvious, like 3 dragons, but there are other ones out there which you see turn up in builds. I guess the build of the week that we're releasing tomorrow has, a good example of this, but these uniques help there be really creative builds in the game, while still meaning that the rest of the items contribute to Spikes being able to build basically min-maxed characters. And put it this way, if we build the game for Johnnies, the Spikes will still find the correct path through it.
Yep.
So we see a lot of new creativity going into trying to come up with cool combos, and then the Spikes happen to be dominant because it's much more cool to show off big numbers and look how fast I can clear this map to this type of community. And that's very cool, because there's a small niche out there who really appreciate the clever, interesting builds, and they get to appreciate what the Johnnies make too.
I need to see a Johnny build with Oro Sacrifice. Somebody, please. All right. Go ahead, Terry.
This one by Comlosi. This is a few about Atziri, and it says, will we have more ultimate bosses like Atziri? Will we have more Uber bosses? And do you think it was a good idea to have Uber Atziri gated behind multiple layers of RNG? And on top of that, was it designed for group or solo play, the Atziri fight?
So we definitely practiced when we were testing with Atziri with both groups and solo, and it's very difficult in the game to not give groups an advantage because of just the pure synergy of if you're running six just incredibly synergistic characters, one guy's got all the auras and the other guy's got all the curses and that kind of thing. It's very hard to not have an advantage, but they're putting a ton of effort in and requiring a lot of organization to do that. So I didn't have a problem with Atziri's gating personally because content is either freely accessible or to some extent gated behind something. And we had such a bad experience with the Maelstrom of Chaos back in the day where it was freely accessible. As soon as you get to the end game, you can just play any arbitrary Maelstrom of Chaos level. And the feedback there was just so frustrating to process. Like, this is one of my worst experiences as a game designer, was trying to go through the way that users were acting to this content. It was just completely irrational as far as we were concerned. And after replacing it with maps, while people to some extent dislike the map pyramid, as it were, and the fact you can fall down rungs, it's much more reasonable feedback, and people are engaging with it a whole lot more positively than with the old Maelstrom thing, where any player can just go to any arbitrary difficulty level. I mean, we were getting situations where people would skip every Maelstrom level up until the highest and then complain bitterly that they were getting slaughtered. It's like if you could jump straight to tier 13 maps and then just die instantly and then rage quit. Because they felt, I see Crip conquering all this content. I mean, obviously Crip wasn't streaming back then, but they see a player conquering all the content visibly, and they want to be that player, and then they fail at it. And so putting gating in allows you to have time to improve your skills and your items before you get to it. So you don't get the equivalent of level 30 players saying, I want to kill Uber Atziri, and then this game sucks. And we've basically been making the gating slightly easier for the Atziri stuff in terms of increasing the drop rates of the bits required to get to it. And this is for several reasons. It was our plan initially to have the Atziri stuff scale up throughout the patch, so more people are getting access later on in the expansion. Players wanted it earlier, and we scaled it up earlier, and I think that the change we're making in 1.2.0 is because we have to reduce the rate of side areas due to the fact that Sacrifice of the Val isn't the primary expansion anymore. We're biasing them much more heavily towards dropping fragments rather than dropping Val skill gems. So Val skill gems will probably decrease in frequency. They'll become a little bit rarer, and fragments will drop a higher amount because there are fewer side areas. So we're trying to make sure that it stays very accessible to do the Uber Atziri content. And this is partially because we haven't introduced incredibly in-game tier of encounter in the new expansion. There isn't an Uber Atziri equivalent the players are going for, because we don't want to compete between those two things, and we want to provide a completely different type of expansion for Path of Exile. So the expansion that's coming next month isn't one that just works towards some final end-game boss that players compete with. It's one that has a completely different axis of progression.
That's freaking great.
That's extremely interesting to hear how players reacted to the Maelstrom of Chaos changes and adding in the maps like that. That's awesome to hear, and it's really cool to hear the process involved in which you guys came up with the map system.
Is a follow-up question for you, Chris, with the whole map system. Right now, that is pretty much one of the only ways to level in game. It is the only way. Do you guys ever foresee having something in the future to, have an option where you could do maps or you could do this? Is that something that the company is going to progress towards?
We tried that with the changes to the experience system. I think it was either in Release or Sacrifice of the Val, I forget which, but we changed the experience formula so that it was easier to get to 100 elsewhere. Now this still means very, very difficult and kind of impractical, and our goal is that players don't have to use maps to get to 100, but if they do maps well, it's probably the easiest way. And so, yes, I would like to head in that direction, but it's difficult to do so while not breaking other things in the process. But it's something that we often talk about, and over time, we're only going to be getting more end games, put it that way.
Very awesome. All right, the next question is from Kamlasi. Will you guys ever consider removing, or at least making the stash all expensive uniques challenge a bit easier? Basically, the Uber Eats.
Yeah. I covered this in the challenges discussion earlier, where our current line of thinking, and this may change before the expansion's released, is to make it a little easier so that more players get it, and to instead give out t-shirts to the first X people, however many t-shirts we feel is reasonable, maybe it's 50, for example, and that way people aren't missing out on shirts if they're still one of the best 50 players, but if by the end of the league several hundred people finish the challenge, then that's not too bad, and we'd probably have some kind of exclusive microtransaction for that. We're still working out the details. That's our current line of thinking.
He has a pretty good follow-up question. He says, can titles be a thing?
I like titles, and to some extent, we still have space in the game client where we could do that kind of thing. But if so, we were going to do it. We'd want to do it well. We added profiles on the website, as you know, and you can pin things there, right? Like you can show off your best achievement. For example, I got 50 something points in the first ladder season, and that's, was it 48? Either way, in terms of the first race season, and that's the kind of thing which I would want to proudly show off in game in some kind of way if I could. Now we're considering giving titles for achievements potentially. It's basically that one day at some point when we introduce this, it will probably take into account things that you've done on your profile that you're proud of, as well as things that you've achieved that have granted a specific title. Now, this isn't a system that's coming anytime soon. It's just occasionally discussed. But we would like to eventually have some form of in-game status that you get for doing these things.
All right, Edgy, you're next up.
Yeah, the next question kind of already answered it, but if you want to touch up on it, it says, you guys have missed the 4-month target for the expansion temporary league cycle. Do they see this being as a one-time thing, or is 5+ months more realistic given their plans and ambitions for the future content?
Okay, well, to clarify what I said earlier in case people missed it, our current
Right.
line of thinking, and this might not happen, is that we have a 5-month cycle that we're in at the moment, just finishing, and August, when we release the new expansion, we release that alongside new leagues, which would last for 3 months, followed by another set of 3-month leagues with new and interesting properties that aren't a repeat of previous ones we've done, giving us 6 months for that third expansion there. And yeah, as I stressed before, this might not happen. So I know I'm going to get hate mail if we do anything different, or even if we do this. But yeah, that's just honestly what our current line of thinking is.
To clarify, so we'll have like with, for instance, domination was a thing. It had shrines. So if you were to release a new 3-month league, both hardcore and softcore would be the domination, rather than just one being one being the other. And then maybe the next 3 months they would both be the same as well.
To clarify, there'd be 4 different leagues in play. So when the expansion comes out, we announce the new regular league and the new hardcore league at the same time. And I know their names and I know their properties and they're completely awesome and I'm really happy about these. And then 3 months later, we announce another set, which are again different. And that means that players have 3 months to play in either league or their favorite one, followed by another different set of leagues with a lot of production value put into them prior to the big 6-monthly expansion coming out. And of course, during that time, we'd be releasing content patches, right? That's the point where maybe trade improvements, maybe the larger PvP tournament stuff will get released depending on how our schedule goes. So it's not like there's no content for the 6 months. It's just that the type of content that introduces new acts or new Sacrifice of the Val level stuff or the new stuff we're planning for this current expansion, those kind of things come on a 4 to 6 monthly time frame.
And that clarification got some love.
From Ragnar, and it says, will there be new monsters introduced in the next August mini expansion, and how many? And will Act 4 be released in parts like what happened with Act 3 in open beta?
So we haven't expanded so the August mini expansion contains new places where you can play, in as much as the Sacrifice of the Val one had some new areas in the form of side areas. We haven't added a new act in it, and so because of this, while there are, it's kind of hard to describe, we haven't directly added many new monster types to the actual core game, right? You're not going to fight completely new types of monsters that you haven't encountered, just like how Sacrifice of the Val didn't add, I think it had one type maybe? The flying green monsters.
The guys that blind you.
Yeah, was that Sacrifice of the Val?
Yes.
Yes.
So I think there may be a supporter design monster coming in the new expansion. I think the Charon's monster may be in. So either way, there's a little bit of stuff, and we've obviously reused art in very interesting ways from when we needed new monsters for certain types of encounters in it. But we haven't gone all out to put monsters in bulk in, and this is partly because Act 4 is heavily under development, and that's getting a ton of monsters, and that's quite a way away still, as in not this expansion, but. All the monster work is going into that.
Got a question for you, Chris. Go ahead.
The second part of that question, will it be released in parts like what happened in Act 3 open beta?
Act 4 is far enough away that we don't know whether we're releasing it in 2 parts or in 1. So I can't really comment on that, but we'll find out.
All right, so the current state of the game, blood magic used to be like the go-to. Now it's just kind of like in the dust. Mainly because of the change to auras and they're now more percentage rather than flat. Do you see a change to auras right now? Because no matter what the meta is, whether it's spectral throw or whatever, auras are like so dominant and you feel like you always have to use them. Does your company, does GGG plan to change the way how the aura meta currently works?
This is the question that's best aimed at Carl or Rory. I mean, they talk about this kind of stuff all the time, and I don't know what their current line of thinking is. One thing to note, of course, is with snapshotting being fixed, it does enable auras to work slightly differently in some ways. You know, maybe because people aren't going to be running 11 of them at once, we can tweak their power level and costs, but this is speculation on my part, so it's better to wait for an answer from Carl or Rory on that one.
Okay, fair enough. And then the next question is asked by Exhort Trivial. Spectral Throw has been the meta for 2 weeks. It created some of the most OP builds ever. It's seen a nerf regarding will it see a nerf regarding the most coming meta change? Is the concept of what does that say? Rangifying, if you know what I mean. Oh, okay. Basically, the concept of you can use a melee weapon and make it ranged. Is it OP? Do you feel that it's like just something that needs to be addressed?
I think that it's relatively OP, but it's not necessarily a problem to have some OP skills in the game. I mean, it provides a good home that players can go to if they want to have something that's going to reliably see them through a lot of the content. Now, Sacrifice of the Val didn't really do a lot to affect the metagame of Spectral Throw, and I can't predict yet whether the new expansion is going to address it either. The balance guys may have addressed it, and if so, that's something that I should probably look in the upcoming patch notes for what to see. But that hasn't been discussed with me. But hopefully there are, like, what I'm worried about is that there would be a large nerf to it, which makes it so it's not fun anymore, and we won't allow that to happen. So if there are changes to Spectral Throw, it'll still be a powerful skill. Now it may just be untouched in that expansion. I'll find out.
So I just want to piggyback on that one a little bit. So are you comfortable with the design where what was once a melee specific character becoming the best range character in the game, essentially with daggers?
Ideally, there would be more trade-offs to it, I think.
Right.
So, with the recent patches, we've released a bunch of, or you have released a bunch of spells, not we, excuse me. You had Glacial Cascade, Flame Surge, and now Lightning Ball. All three of which have, Glacial Cascade, probably received the most love out of the three. How's the dev team feeling about that, not receiving the best feedback about those skills? Do you have any plans to change them in the future?
These new skills all essentially are new ways of delivering damage. Things like Storm Call are, delayed damage. Flame Surge was for a specific niche purpose that it enables some types of builds. I mean, that's very much a skill aimed at Johnnies rather than Spikes.
Right.
And even if in their current form people don't necessarily like them, or maybe they're not used very much, they're there as tools for future builds. I mean, we so frequently see a completely dominating build come out using stuff that players, wrote off as crap in the past, and it's really nice to see it finally get its day. I mean, eventually there will be a Flame Surge build, which is completely overpowered, and, that may involve us not having to improve the power of the skill in the meantime. So I'm personally not worried about us introducing skills that have niche purposes into the game. I mean, we're currently at a relatively good state in terms of the number of skills we had, but we'll keep pumping them out and try to, hopefully, shift the metagame in interesting ways just due to the weird combinations of skills.
All right. So, go ahead, Terry.
I was just going to read the next question from Queequeg. It's any plans for a chaos-based spell that will take advantage of the cool damage over time passive nodes?
I don't know, but I can ask the guys.
Fair enough. Something that needs to be addressed for a while, Life Leech, especially when considered with spells. Life Leech is I think in a pretty poor state. I know you mentioned Mana Leeches on your notes. Has Life Leech been discussed at all around the office?
It received a bit of a nerf in the Sacrifice of the Val expansion, as you know, and we'll be reviewing whether or not that was too harsh. I mean, it certainly did put the lid on that for a while, and maybe it's time for the lid to come off slightly. I don't know. It's something that I'll talk to Carl and Rory about and defer to their decision because they have a much better understanding of exactly what builds it affects. But I feel that it may have been a little too strong, that nerf.
Oh yeah, I mean, you could still make do with it in some physical builds. But pretty much Atziri gloves. You want the Atziri gloves, or even Val Pack. With the nerf to Life Leech and then the nerf to Val Pack. Even though you moved Val Pack, it just feels just like stale. Like as a spellcaster, you don't even want to bother using it. All right.
The Leech change really hurt Claws too as well.
Yeah, and Claws in the current state don't even have life on hit on them, other than a level 46 one, I believe. Do you have any other questions?
Yeah, I kind of want to piggyback on that chaos stuff. Has there ever been any talks of implementing a status ailment for a crit chaos hit?
We've talked about that occasionally in the office. Like we had a conversation recently where we tried to redesign how status elements work, and eventually ended up not changing them in that conversation. But we certainly do talk about crit ones occasionally, and there are some interesting ideas discussed. I don't think that there are any new things coming to the status elements in 1.2.0, but one of them's receiving some rebalancing at least.
That's a
Ooh,
really good thing because
that tease.
there's something I feel grinding gear games does as a whole with lightning in general, because lightning is just one of those things that has so much potential because of the way how shock works. But it's something the community's been saying. Nerf shock slightly, but give us some higher base crit on the skill gems, because right now almost all of the skill gems are like 4%, with the exception of lightning warp, discharge, and tempest shield. But come on. So I mean, overall, I think that's something that really needs to be addressed. We want some lightning crit builds. It's awesome.
Cool.
I'll read off the next question. Shake Shake 2. Would it be possible to relocate Sarn Arena to be in a more convenient location to attract more casual PvPers to Arena, or potentially get more people interested in PvP? Or in general, what are your plans of getting more people interested in PvP?
So it's unlikely we're going to move the entrance to the arena because those towns are a ton of effort to make, and I mean it's the San Arena, right? Like it's in the arena in San, which is up the stairs. It's probably not going anywhere. But the grand plan with PvP is that once we have a proper incentivized tournament structure where, you can clearly see who the PvP champion for a given season is, and there's rewards and lots of stuff in the news about it, is that will cause a lot of people to have to build PvP characters, to care about PvP guides, to trade for PvP items, to practice PvP in, the various options like dueling and the 1v1 and 3v3 matchmaking. It'll mean that there are lots of PvP people floating around to play Capture the Flag. The Sign Arena will be full of PvP players, and in general, PvP will be what a lot of the community are talking about. As soon as we formally turn on prizes and actual, tournament structure related to that. So that's not on yet, and I don't have a time frame for it, but it's something that we're very excited about, and it should really help incentivize PvP.
The next question is from Silorine. This one might get you some flack here, Chris. Is there any information about what uniques are going to get the nerf when the next, the legacy change?
I haven't heard a thing about any changes to uniques in 1.2.0. Now, there probably is a big plan. The nice thing about the way that our company works at the moment is the compartmentalization is working, right? I don't have to supervise every random thing. And so when I say make sure that the uniques are adjusted correctly, the guys do that, and I trust their opinion, and it's going to be perfect, and I don't even need to think about it until I read the patch notes and go, oh, that's really cool. Or, holy crap, we're making a huge mistake, or whatever, And
what are you guys
occasionally,
doing?
honestly, occasionally, like 99% of the time, the changes that are made are great. Sometimes I'll see something I disagree with, and then there's a discussion about it. This is often to do with the power level of newly introduced uniques. The guys are very good at nerfing something down, but once you've been working on something for so long, it still can be overpowered without necessarily realizing it. So we have a few interesting discussions where they show me the post-nerfed version of a new unique, and I say, I'm still uncomfortable, it's too close to a good rare, let's go change it up a bit. And, I mean, that may be a frustrating thing to work with, I guess, but we're trying to avoid getting another Soul Taker added to the game. Anyway, this is completely off topic. With regard to 1.2.0, I don't know about any unique changes coming there. I'll try to find out, though. I mean, it's not something we really want to surprise people with.
I must admit, that was probably the biggest spoiler of all. You're not a micromanager. There you go. All right, so go ahead.
Next question from El Peepso. What is your opinion on people making 2 accounts after getting the 1,000 point reward in races?
To get a second 1,000 point reward?
Yes.
Just like 1,000 point reward.
I'm okay with them doing 2 accounts. I can't see a way that it's abusive, right? Like they're not playing both as long as they're not playing both in the same race, right? Like if they finish 1,000 points fast and then get another set, like they're still putting a ton of effort into this, It's
Yeah.
I mean, sure, it sucks to see that someone else got 2 of a really valuable item, but they went for months without sleep and
Give it to them.
Like, sure, it sounds like the kind of thing which is an exploit, but it kind of isn't because they're putting in so much extra work.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean,
definitely a time investment.
It's a typical scenario. I'm not even mad. I'm just impressed. The Ron Burgundy right there.
Yeah.
All right, the next question is from Sondekius. Life gain on hit for spells. Is this going to be on only one unique item, or can we see this in the future on the tree?
I don't know whether it's going to make its way onto the tree. This is another question that I can't really answer, but typically stuff will eventually be on more than one unique. Some things don't go on the tree, though. I mean, it pretty much, if it's a unique property, then it probably stays on uniques.
I like
I
that.
could be wrong, though, in this particular case.
And Carl and Roy are just face palming right now. All right. So, do you have anything you would like to touch upon, Chris, before we stop this segment with you? Anything you would like to address with the community?
Well, the community should really look forward to the expansion stuff that we're going to be announcing soon. We have, like, I understand we've been very quiet in the news about it, right? Like, some news days occasionally are just, here's some screenshots that want a competition, not necessarily big game-breaking changes. And this is because we have a really packed schedule of stuff that we want to announce to the community, basically starting, late next week kind of thing. There's going to be a lot of information coming out, and it's going to be a good month, I think, in terms of teasers. We don't necessarily have a pile of corrupted items to link in the news like we did last time, which was a lot of fun, but we do have dozens of other cool announcements, and we've been trying to line up a really interesting schedule for how to reveal all the features in the expansion, like involving external news sites for some of it, so that different places are announcing different things and so on. But what I made sure of was that when we ourselves announce the expansion at the start of this chain of stuff, that we include enough information so everyone gets a good idea what's in it, and all the other things that the sites are announcing are just extra information to help make it look better. But most of, like, a good half of the information is released on the day that we've scheduled our announcement to be on.
There's a bit of feedback whenever you come out with your new leagues and your teasers. We all love that. The one thing I've gotten overall from the community is the day before you release the new skill tree, can you just write this down for the other guys 1 week in advance? That's all I'm asking. We want that thing nice and early so we can plan our builds. But I understand you're constantly tweaking it, so it's kind of hard to do that. But that one day, man, it kills us.
We have a slight technical issue where we can't update the site with the tree until, like, we've actually deployed the patch to it. Now, there are other solutions, right? We could just say, hey, look, people are running passive skill tree tools that, let them do tree planning and maybe not using our site. So let's give the tree data to all of those tool authors or something like that. There are other options as well, like updating the alpha site and making maybe just the passive skill tree page public to everyone. But we'll work out a way.
Oh, freaking awesome. I really appreciate that, Chris. That is huge.
We'll try to work out a way. I understand it's very important. The core fact that when the patch is released, you get to see the tree for the first time, and you're having to spend an hour or two looking at that, working out what you're going to play, rather than actually playing, probably causes some people to not bother playing,
That's amazing. Made my day right there. I'm done.
Ray's QT has a really good question. He says, right now, XP items do not get the same penalty as penalty players while doing endgame maps. Because of this, at level 98, a character running a level 78 map receives 500% more experience than the base 21% increased experience gained through items. Because of this, level 100 in 3 weeks on a 1 month race is very realistic. Do you think that this needs to change, or was this an intended mechanic?
I'll bring this up with the guys. Providing that the increased experience items are working correctly, I don't see there being a small advantage in use over other things, right? It's one of the things where you gain a few percent extra to just yourself down in other ways. Having said that, if it's much of an effect, I'm sure to discuss it.
Is Chris lagging?
I think
the call's lagging. No. Oh, hold on a second. Maybe we should just recall everybody. Hold on a second, everybody. Recalling. Back up.
That sounds much better.
Hello?
Hello.
Yeah, it's Twitch. Calling up Chris again. Hold on. Stand by, everybody. A little technical difficulties. I think Chris might have lagged out there.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, we're good. We're good now. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Do you want me to repeat the answers to the last question? Or?
Please,
Yeah,
please. Sorry about
we
that.
didn't hear anything.
Okay, so regarding the increased experience items, if they're working correctly where they provide a small benefit to experience, then you're offsetting that against the opportunity cost of what other items you're wearing. Like, for example, if you get a few percent more experience from your helm, but it slows you down in killing monsters because it's not as good as another one, then that kind of thing is okay. It sounds like in this case that it's a lot more, um, a lot bigger of a difference, and so I'll talk to the guys and make sure that we can balance this out correctly.
Oh, freaking awesome. We've all seen specs where someone was dual wielding those scepters, right? Mm-hmm. And double rings. Abusing the system.
Illusion Wild has also a good question. If possible, Chris, can we get any new info on the next supporter packs? I'm sure people want to know if they should wait for the new one or upgrade now.
Am I going to say anything other than do both?
Good answer. Good answer.
We haven't announced anything about the other supporter packs. These current ones are going away on the 28th, and I can't really talk about the next set at all, but put it this way, if you like the effects in the current ones, then this is your only chance to get them. So if you feel you're going to be kicking yourself in the future for not having these particular back attachments, portal effects, and titles and so on, then you should probably upgrade now. Otherwise, there's cool stuff coming in the future, and so maybe you get that instead, but it's hard to know because you don't get to see both sets at the same time to make up your mind, which I'm sorry about.
Okay. Fair enough. I mean, is there possible to get like a rough timeline of when the next one will be released so we know like when we need to save up?
They're not that far away. We're trying to time them with the new expansion, so it isn't
Okay.
a particularly long wait. But thank you very much for the support, everyone. Regardless of which pack you buy, we still love you.
Wow. But if you don't buy one, you don't?
Well, we love those players too. I mean, they provide other players in the game for people to show off their microtransactions too.
It's true. So, we keep asking you all these positive feedback. I want to hear some negative, Chris. If you had one thing about Path of Exile right now that just infuriates you about, what would it be? Completely open-ended.
That's a tough question. What makes me angry?
The term scrub core.
Oh, well, yeah, there's that.
That wasn't a really big deal. That thing was just that we were internally trying to incentivize both types of players. That I don't even think we have formal moderation policies against people saying scrub core. I mean, maybe we do if it's classed as bullying on the forums, but that's not a big company drive.
Right.
There's not very much to complain about, honestly. We have at times had a much more toxic community in some cases, but people have been, nicer to each other. I personally feel recently, and people are so supportive of the things that we do. And wait, this is turning into too much of a positive answer, isn't it? You wanted something negative.
I want that nitty gritty, Chris. You're too nice.
It's tough to say. Okay. I mean, probably the most stressful thing at the moment is us just getting the expansion shipped on time because there's so many moving pieces going together and a lot of other stuff behind the scenes. Like, for example, we're launching another country. I believe that Garena have announced that Taiwan will get Path of Exile fully localized in a few weeks. And so this means that we have, in conjunction with our expansion, we're working on a Taiwanese version of the game. And that's quite a lot of work, right? Like having the whole thing in traditional Chinese, and it's looking really, really awesome, but it's certainly like quite a stressful experience trying to handle both large deadlines at the same time. But that's not something that fans have to worry about because we're well on track to release both of them, and they're looking really good. It's just a quite a large challenge at the end of the 5-month cycle to wrap it all up.
All right. Well, this it's been an hour, Chris, already. We appreciate you coming by. It means a lot to us that you've done this twice in a row. Hopefully, in 5 episodes from now, we either have you back or another set of devs. People keep saying Rory and Carl. Are they up for the challenge?
You'd have to check with them. Hopefully, I mean they're some of the busiest people we have at the moment with the push for the expansion. But then, having said that, if you have devs on every 5 episodes or so, then it will be comfortably after the expansion's released at the point that the Unix have them.
And we could always, bump one up or back. We have no problems with that, whatsoever. I'll send the 2 of them an email and get in contact with them. I appreciate that. All right. Do you have any other?
Well, thanks very much for having me.
Oh, no problem, dude. No problem at all, sir.
I've run out of things to say, but there'll be plenty to say in the news later on early next week as we start talking about the expansion stuff.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. I mean, it means a lot.
Thank you so much.
Not a problem. It was great being here, and thanks very much for the good questions, everyone.
Have a good one, Chris.
Take care.
Send him pizza, they say. More pizza. You know, the first thing he said when we called him, he said that he liked it and enjoyed the pizza. Like, it was really awesome.
Absolutely.
That was the first thing he said.
Yeah, we were. If you guys want to know, we just called up when we called up Chris. That was like when we were, discussing how it's gonna run down. He was like, "We really appreciate the pizza. Thank you, community." But you guys didn't get to hear that. So if anybody chipped in for that or you're supporting that, much love. So the last 15 minutes here, the last 15 to 20 minutes, we're going to discuss the answers Chris just brought up. There's some things we would really like to see. I'm actually kind of surprised that Leech has not yet been addressed. I thought for sure that was one of the first things that the devs are going to work on. What do you guys think about that, Terry? Terry Hedgie.
Like for 1.2 coming up?
Yeah.
Or just like in general? I definitely think Mana Leech it's been a while. It needs to be like more usable. Right now, it's just you're most likely not going to get back a lot of the mana that you use in most cases. Of the Eldritch Battery and Mind Over Matter like combination is the go-to just to be able to sustain. Aside from like putting in Mana Leech on your link.
Yeah, I think maybe the solution's already done within the tree. I don't know. We don't, like he said, there's a lot of changes to the top of the tree, so that is a mana intensive place. So I think maybe the solution is within the tree. I don't know. I'm hoping that it's the case if it's not changed.
He brought up that life itself is being changed. Last time life was changed, it got nerfed overall, and then I think it was changed later on again to bring it back to where it was. Correct? Life.
Yeah, the Scion Life Wheel got nerfed to the ground.
And life has always been one of those things where it's life or CI. It's just the ever going battle. Obviously, CI's in the weak point right now, but they said they're readjusting life as a whole. What's your speculation behind that?
I think Witch, Shadow, Life.
You mean like the nodes, or like life actually how it like functions? So if they're going to maybe redo the nodes, you think adding more to those areas or like changing them currently?
I think maybe the nodes will become even more efficient, but not as many. And I think the frequency of HP nodes should be and retain on the left, to the bottom side of the tree where it's predominantly red. But I think that, the nodes that exist right now may receive like a quality buff, kind of like what we saw early on with the Witch node, the 1212.
That was amazing, that buff. Oh, God.
Yeah, I'm stoked that there are some witch changes and upper tree. That's like what you've been wanting like the most.
No, when he said witch changes, I was like, oh my God, finally! I don't have to travel through a power charge to get up there, or I would just avoid it completely.
Yeah, it wasn't exclusive to witch, but he said once they started on witch, they started going outwards, and the amount of theory crafting that's gonna rekindle, and all the experts are gonna have to rethink on how they want to plan their tree again. I mean that's super exciting, especially for like a build enthusiast as you. You're just gonna love tinkering around, like recalculating that math, finding the most efficient way to go around, and I really like that. Essentially the tree just changing dynamically.
Yeah, that area has needed some love for a while, and to be fair, we expected that in the last 4 months, but then the Marauder change kind of was like, what, really? But it wasn't a bad change; it was just like unexpected change. Another thing he brought up was the 4 leagues within a 6-month time frame.
Yeah, I was under the impression they were just gonna flip, like so that it wouldn't have to come up with new mods or whatever, and it would save that much more on development time. But I guess, if they do that kind of strategy, they're set on doing 4 different mods.
Within 6 months.
I know what I wanted to ask him that I forgot.
Swing and a miss. Good job.
I wanted to ask him about the invaders, like how they felt like about the invaders not seeing the permanent part of the game, and what their opinion was, if they wanted to put them in a different spot or bring them back later, or all that code is there. All those bosses are designed.
They don't want to let it rot. They spent the money on it.
Yeah, but it's not being a part of. It's not going to be a part of the permanent game. They've already said the invaders are out.
Bosses? I think there's going to be invader bosses in areas that don't have a unique monster right now. Some are going to be added, but they said like they might be rebalanced.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what he
So
said
they'll
in
just
our
be
last
That was in the
used
podcast.
map
parts.
stuff where he
Okay.
said it.
Yep. What else was a big thing that he brought up?
The, the progression on the map system in the closed beta, like I didn't play closed beta to that extent, and hearing how people like complained about like, oh, I'm trying to do a 78 map. Well, your character isn't ready necessarily for that map, but removing the like the ladder that a player has to climb to reach that state to actually complete that map. I think like hearing them people complain about it and then they added this process was like it's so cool to hear that. Like that people actually complained that they had access to everything at first and they weren't taking enough like responsibility to make sure they had the playing abilities or like their character was strong enough to clear it and then they just got like smashed and like I can't do this sucks and it's just so cool to hear that. I really like that.
Were you guys surprised that that Spectral Throw was going to remain the same? I was. I expected
I
some
was,
sort of
yeah.
hate towards it.
Well, just the dagger nodes. I mean, if they don't have spectral throw, I think dagger nodes are good. But with spectral throw, they're just too good. You know, they're just those dagger nodes are the most efficient, easy route. You know, god tier,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of upsetting. Like you should have more dynamic end games. Like I'm talking about like mirror worthy builds with the best uniques and stuff. I don't feel that wanderers and archers should fall so far behind a dagger build. I should have asked about the movement skill for the ranger. That we ran out of time, but that was definitely one I wanted to ask if they were going to add some kind of vault or disengage or some kind of additional feature that's unique. Definitely couldn't be stale. We
So
had
a lot of people were talking
go
about
ahead.
CI. Like CI is one of those things where it's like if you have the money, it's insane. It's insane. But like it's not a poor man's build. It needs so much, you know. And also with CI, you need mana leech or mana regen because you don't have the option of Eldritch Battery, but or Blood Magic, obviously. So I think CI is one of those things where it's not where it should be, but it's close. And the Atziri gloves make that where it's that once you have the Atziri glove, CI is just like ridiculous. Or once if you can afford Valpak, but it definitely needs to be addressed. Especially when it comes to stun and freeze with CI. But overall, I think CI it's okay. It's not insane like it used to be.
Oh, well, he did mention that there was one status ailment that was going to be changed, and if it was my guess, it'd probably be shock with CI. I
I
think
thought it
maybe
was
there's.
shock too. Some people were saying ignite, burning.
I don't think so. I don't think that's much of a problem with CI. I mean, magic damage, running Purity of Fire, your ES is good as life. The thing with CI is your armor and evasion is, gimped because of using hybrid gear or pure ES gear. So elemental, I don't see so much as a problem as much as stun and shock. Like one little baby hit from a shock or a spark can last like a 4 second shock stack, and then
Yeah.
getting triple shock stack as CI is so easy.
Same
And
thing with
I don't know,
freeze
maybe
if you don't have Oxium or Dream
yeah.
Frags
What's
or whatever.
what's that note on the right side of the tree? It's like 15% chance to avoid status ailment.
Crystal Skin or
By,
something like
by
that.
Ranger.
Yeah, it's by Ranger. I think
I forgot the
it's
name of it,
Crystal Skin or
but
Yeah,
something like
Crystal Skin.
maybe
something
we'll
like
see
that.
some more buffed so that CI has a utilities passive node that they can use and utilize to not make it so that like you need godly gear to combat all the elements of CI and the drawbacks. But I overall I feel CI is in a good spot. It's a good end game answer. It could be a little bit better, sure, but I think it's good to have cheap builds and really expensive builds. But I don't like to see such huge gaps between daggers and wands and bows. Like daggers
In
were meant to be melee characters originally, and now they're
oh
the best range character.
yeah, it's frustrating, but I think it's just something we need to get over. It exists. It's there. It's not bad for the game. It keeps people
Yeah,
interested. It's just frustrating because melee characters. If you're a fan of melee, then it becomes slightly frustrating. But you're still insane. Like on my Reaver, I was
but
one-shotting like bosses nearly.
even with being superior ranged, they shouldn't be that much superior. Like I'm okay with them being the best, but the best by far, like I don't necessarily agree with. But
It takes a lot to get to that state, though. I feel like you can have much cheaper builds for like a tenth the cost, maybe perform at like half and still be unkillable or just super sustained, like Zoltan's Bloodseeker build.
You guys in chat, you guys had a lot of great nitty-gritty balance questions, but we didn't feel like, you know, like Chris said, Carl and Roy are the balance guys, and they would best answer that. And we didn't want to ask a lot of questions that he would be like, well, I don't really know the answer to that. We already asked a few that we thought that he would be able to answer and kind of airballed there. But overall, the questions were great. Thank you guys for participating, contributing on the forums and the YouTube.
And to be fair, he released a lot of spoilers today. Like, I'm completely satisfied. And anything he couldn't, he was very honest about it. You know, like, expect it in the next patch. Like,
or he gave a disclaimer like, it's not set in stone, but this is the idea, and it's an idea in the good direction. I don't think he had any bad ideas, you know, or ideas that I was like not hyped about. I guess the only one I think was the 8 challenges. I would have liked to see more, but
more
who knows
challenges.
What those 8.
Well, the challenges, that's a whole thing altogether, though, Hedgie. Like, the fact that they're you know, they're still going to, you know, keep the T-shirt there for the hardcore players, but offer more to the casual player. Because let's be honest, getting 8 challenges in this past one was harder, way harder than the other 2.
Yeah, that axe was way more trouble than it was worth for you know, a lot of people.
And it's not even like used to make builds really, other than like gimmicky Firestorm builds. Like, it was that rare.
Yeah.
So I think the challenge change was one of the best things, because let's be fair, most of the people that play Path of Exile are casual at best. You know, they're not that hardcore gamer. And even the most hardcore gamers, he said only 20 people, was it, that achieved the all 8? I mean, that's just nuts.
Mm-hmm.
And most of that was probably in the last week, where people were just like, you know, shifting axes around and buying them.
Yeah.
Wait, don't you lose it if you get rid of it too? I don't remember.
I think you have to have it in your possession.
Yep. So I mean, it's just one of those things where it was a necessary evil, you know, and I'm glad that they're taking the direction there with the challenges.
Mm-hmm. And I'll just use this time. I want to let you guys know that I've really enjoyed doing these podcasts, but for personal reasons, I'm choosing to step down. Zeno's got some really exciting news coming up forward, so you have to stay tuned and check out what he has to say. But I really enjoy doing these podcasts. But yeah, this will be my last one. Thank you guys.
All right. Thanks a lot, Hedgie, you know, for coming along for these 10 episodes. I do have another host in mind. I've been working the logistics with him. It's another well-known streamer, and you guys can all speculate who it is. I'll give you a little hint. It's another, quote, yes man. That's what I'm working towards. He's a good guy. He's good for the community. And yes, this podcast is extremely positive in nature. There are times we complain about things, but we're here to promote the game. We're not here to, you know, just whine. Desync is always going to be there. There's no point in bringing it up over and over. Or the major flaws in the game. They're aware of it. The company's aware of it. But know that I am not going anywhere as of right now. I like this podcast. Terry's still here, but we are working logistics and having another host. Also, for the next episode,